Awesome. Am I on? Can you hear me? Oh, thank you, David, so much. So beautiful. Well, Duke was going to talk about something today. I'm sure it would have been wonderful. But I am very enthusiastic about talking about the Word God. And when I wandered in here in the early 90s, one of the only reasons that I was able to stay is that I liked this place where they didn't say God too often. Made it a little bit easier for me. I really wasn't very comfortable with that word God. I had grown up in a very devoted Methodist family. We went to church every Sunday. It was the kind where, did anybody else get those little medals for going to church? I loved those. I didn't really like going to church, but when my mom would say, "Now, Jan, it's time to get up and go to church on Sunday morning," she could always remind me at that point that if I didn't go, I wasn't going to get my little medal for the year, and that's what got me out of bed. So they definitely knew how to motivate me when I was about 9 or 10 years old. But there were things that were coming up that I was hearing on Sunday that just really wasn't quite making sense to me. And you know, as a child, when you're hearing your parents talk and the way they talk about others makes a big influence on you. And I always know that if they wanted to give someone the highest possible compliment, they would say, "Oh, that Judy, she is such a God-fearing woman. Oh, that Bob, he is a God-fearing man. It is a good thing." What? Even as a child, that just quite didn't make sense to me. That the best you could possibly do in your life is to fear this person or thing called God. I was struggling with that concept. This idea that there was somebody watching over me at every moment, making sure that I didn't do anything wrong. And so at the ripe old age of 11, I really wanted to believe. And I knew that my parents told me that having faith was a very, very important part of being a Methodist. And so there was one night where I thought I had the perfect plan. My mother had given me for my birthday a necklace, a pair of praying hands. And it was my prized possession. And so I came up with this idea that before I went to bed at night, when I always said my prayers, that I would take the necklace off and I would put it on the desk that was at the end of my bed. And as I got down and said my prayers that evening, with my little necklace sitting there on the side of the desk, I asked for only one thing from God that night. God, I'm really trying here. All I ask, and I promise, if you'll just move those praying hands from one side of the desk to the other, I promise I will never have any doubt. I will have faith, and I will believe everything that they tell me. And I meant it. I was so optimistic. Not much. Not move the praying hands to another room. Not move the praying hands off the desk. Literally, God, all you have to do is just kind of nudge it along and be on the other side in the morning, and I am with you. And I laid my head down that night in great hopes that all the questions and concerns that I had about religion were going to be finally answered. And I woke up the next morning, and those praying hands were still where I left them. And I said, "That's it. Screw religion. I was done. 11 years old, I remember it as if it was yesterday. From that moment forward, I said that I'd given God the supreme, exact, black and white test, and He didn't come through for me. And so I went on into my teens and my 20s and my 30s, and I had that arrogant swagger of a confident atheist. I just knew all those God-believing people were full of nonsense. I knew the answer. I felt really, really good about it. And if you had asked me at any time during that point in my life, I would have been more than glad to share with you that you were a complete idiot to be believing in God. And that really worked for a while. I got married, had a family, had a job, had lots of great things going in my life. Externally, sort of everything sort of was fitting together. Everything was wonderful. I think many people would have said, oh, what a successful life you're having. But somehow that arrogant swagger was starting to wear off. It wasn't quite working for me anymore. I was afraid to admit that I really wasn't quite sure if what I had believed was actually true. And I wasn't quite really ready to give God another try. But I was willing to at least ask a question. And so when I showed up here on Unity Temple's doorsteps in 1991, I was ready to take a look again and see maybe there was something to this God thing. And in Unity, they have these truth principles. And the very first one is that there is one power and one presence in the universe. Some people call it God. And so I decided that I was willing to take a look at what was this thing that people called God. And one of the favorite books I read during that time, some of you may be familiar with it, it's a book called A History of God. It's by an ex-nun named Karen Armstrong, and I fell in love with her. She actually tries to take the 4,000-year quest for God and summarize it in one book, a walk through every possible way that we might look at God. And one of the themes of the book is that people have had this experience that was so incredibly powerful that once they had it and tried to describe it, that other people wanted it as well. And so somebody would have this wonderful experience and say, I experienced God. And people would come up to them and say, what did you do? Well, I was sitting under a tree. Or I was standing in the temple in this exact spot. Or I knelt. Or I had my hands just like this, and I held my foot like that. And I experienced God. And so then, sure enough, other people are going, that's what I've got to do. If I can just get my foot in the right place and get my hands positioned, I'll experience God too. And so you have this plethora of possibilities of people saying that they experience God by doing some specific thing. Others tried to copy them, and sometimes it worked. They too experienced this magnificence, this presence that was indescribable. And other people did that exact same thing. And they didn't have the experience. And so they were told that they must not have enough faith, that they weren't quite doing it right, that if they tried just a little bit harder, doing it exactly that way, that they too would experience God. And what Karen Armstrong started to describe in her book is that in this history of God as it has evolved, is that there are a myriad of ways to experience this incredible presence. And in fact, in the 1800s, there was a movement called New Thought, which is what the Unity movement came out of. And this idea is that we each have the spark of divinity within us, that we each have this ability to experience this powerful presence. And it can be new for each of us. How amazing it is that we can sit in this room full of people who each of you may have had your own experience with the power of the presence. It might have been in nature, or here sitting in the meditation, or with your family, or all alone. And yet we can all come together on a Sunday morning and celebrate this power and this presence and have not experienced it in exactly the same way. How awesome is that? There's a man named Mark Robert Waldman, and he's written a book called How God Changes Your Brain. And in it, he's a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. He talks about using fMRIs to see what it is when we think about God, what actually is happening in our head. And what he has discovered, amazingly, is that the words and the positions and all those rituals that we've grown up thinking that that was what God was all about are irrelevant. He did an experiment with a Franciscan nun and asked her to pray and meditate as she always does. And she described her prayer and meditation as just having a sense of closeness to God. And he filmed her on an fMRI to see what exactly was going on in her brain when she was having this experience of feeling close to God. And then he did the exact same experience with a Buddhist nun. And she was asked what she did in her prayer and meditation, and she said, meditate on pure consciousness. And so they filmed her brain as well. And what he discovered is their brains at that point of prayer and meditation looked almost exactly the same. It didn't matter if you called it being closer to God or if you called it pure consciousness, as long as it was a positive experience. And Mark Robert Waldman realized that that was the key distinction about the changes in the brain, not the words that we used. And in fact, he talked about that it is the positive versus the negative that causes the differentiation in the way your brain looks when you think about God. If your experience of God is one of a kind and loving and compassionate presence, then your brain lights up in a healthy way. The cortisol levels in your body go down. Your blood pressure is reduced. And there are actually these dendrites that form in your brain that cause your brain to be healthier. And unfortunately, if you have a negative experience of God, of a vengeful, punishing, looking over at you in a way that brings fear and anxiety into your life, then that actually has a negative effect on your brain as well. Your cortisol levels go up. It actually destroys your brain. And so it's not about being a Pollyanna. It's not about saying everything is perfect and wonderful and there are no problems in life. Because I know that each of you have had your struggles. And it is an opportunity in life so that we will see what is wrong and we will fix it. But we can fix it in a way that is encouraging and positive and hopeful. And it is the complaining and the whining without action that actually destroys our brain. Some people also think that, well, if I don't do it for 10 years, sit under a tree, go in a cave, then I really can't make a big difference in my brain, so why should I even try? But in fact, the reality is that they found that in as little as 12 weeks, sitting 30 minutes a day, they can actually now see your brain changing by 10%. So there's an encouragement that we each have everything we need in order to have this experience of the one power and one presence in the universe. Has anybody ever seen those car commercials where they're like out in the desert and they're driving 100 miles an hour and they're doing like donuts and all that kind of stuff? Really encouraging you to buy that car. Don't you have that sense of playfulness that I want that car just so I can go in the desert and do donuts? And drive 100 miles an hour and not get a ticket. Woohoo! But then they have this little disclaimer. Professional driver, please do not try this at home. And the great thing about prayer and meditation is you don't need to be a professional driver. You can try this at home, or in the park, or here today, or with your friends. There are no side effects except the good ones. And so we each have within us everything we need in order to have an experience of God, or whatever you want to call it. In this moment, you have everything you need, the tools, the techniques, to have that experience of this incredible presence that is ripe with the wisdom that can help us live our lives in a more joyful way. And so when we go to the meditation, we're going to actually experiment with this experience of God. But there's a couple of other things that I want to add. And one is the power that we have to impact each other. That when we get together and have I'm trying to find the right word. Well, I can't say that word. We get a whining session. We get a moaning session. We get a complaining session. Anybody ever got together with friends and talked about all the things that irritate you in your life? All the things that are going wrong, and everybody who has made you frustrated and angry that day? Or is it just me? Hopefully some of you can recognize that. Those are the moments when we are not helping our brain. We have an opportunity when we get together and when we actually lower our voice and talk in a kind and compassionate way to each other, that we start to create something called neural resonance. That we have this ability to not only affect our own brain, but the brains of our friends and our family by speaking in a loving and kind and supportive way. And that too, I think, can be that experience with another person of the power and the presence in the universe. And so as we go into the meditation, we're going to try a couple of different tools and techniques today. First of all, I want to ask you to yawn and stretch. Now, you may have already been yawning during my talk. And I'm actually grateful because there have been 43 studies that have been done that say that yawning and stretching, see, Chris can't stop. Yawning and stretching are one of the top 2 techniques for waking up your brain. So you think when you wake up in the morning, you're actually waking up your brain. How cool is that? We can also take some deep breaths, which we know get that sense of calmness and centering. And the other thing we can do is smile. Try it right now. They know that actually smiling causes positive biochemical thingamajiggies to happen in your body. And so as we start the meditation, my encouragement would be, is we'll start with a yawn and a stretch. Pam Silva, you are doing an extra credit job. Yawning is now a good thing, guys. We're going to yawn, we're going to stretch, we're going to take a few deep breaths, and we're going to smile. And we're going to think about God. And in this time of meditation, you get a chance to experience the one power and one presence in the universe in whatever way works for you. So let's take that into meditation. So as we begin this time of meditation, we start with a yawn and a stretch. And a few slow, full, deep breaths. Sometimes it helps to just simply breathe in to the count of 4 and breathing out to the count of 6. And just add a simple smile. As we allow that sense of settling in and settling down. Take this opportunity to bring our awareness into this room and into our body. Aware of the way your feet feel against the floor. And in this very moment, I encourage you to give yourself this most precious gift. To take this opportunity to reflect upon who or what is God in my life? How do I experience this one power and this one presence? Charlotte reminded me that Louise Hay says, you get to choose how you experience God. So why not choose a God that is encouraging and working for you instead of against you? There is power in this present moment to find within you the essence of who and what you are.
and to find that connection to God. And so as we take this time to sit in the silence, we can let go of any preconceived notions, any past ideas, any previous experiences. And just allow these moments to be fresh and new. To be whatever we would like for them to be. To encourage and support each other. To find our own experience of God. In the silence. As we let go of the silence, we can take with us this recognition that the most precious gift we can give ourselves is an opportunity each day to experience the one power and one presence in the universe. And that essence of who and what we are, that divine spark that is within each and every one of us. And so it is.